Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we're looking at a phenomenon that feels a bit like a slow-motion car crash.
Yeah.
One that everybody sees coming, but nobody quite knows how to steer out of.
Right.
Because we usually talk about global shifts in terms of, AI or climate change, things that explode or burn. But the shift we are unpacking today is quieter, it's grayer, and honestly, it might be more disruptive than anything Silicon Valley is cooking up.
It's definitely the biggest challenge that doesn't get a headline every single day.
Yeah.
We are digging into a stack of research centered on what's called the silver tsunami. The core text we're pulling from is actually from the AP Human Geography curriculum, specifically topic 2.9, which looks at the challenges of an aging global demographic.
Okay.
And we've supplemented that with some economic case studies from Japan and Western Europe. So the mission today for you listening is to figure out what happens to a civilization when the demographic pyramid flips.
Right, when you end up with more grandparents than grandchildren.
Exactly.
And that's the image that really stuck with me from the reading, the inverted pyramid. Because I think most of us intuitively know the population is getting older. We see it around us.
Sure.
But the scale of this is what's wild. I saw a stat recently that in Japan, they now sell more adult diapers than baby diapers.
Yeah.
Which, it feels like a punchline, but it's a harsh economic reality.
It is a staggering metric, and it's the perfect crystallization of the problem. Japan is really the canary in the coal mine here. But to your point, this isn't just about people living longer.
Right.
If it was just that, it would be a celebration. The silver tsunami is actually the collision of two separate forces.
Okay, let's break those down.
So, force one, we conquered early death. You've got sanitation, antibiotics, statins. We are keeping people alive well into their 80s and 90s.
Which, for the record, I am very much in favor of.
Oh, we all are. It's arguably the crowning achievement of modern science.
Yeah.
But then you have force two, which is the collapse of crude birth rates.
Meaning fewer babies being born.
Right. We aren't just having fewer kids. In many developed nations, we've stopped replacing ourselves entirely. You need a fertility rate of 2.1 just to keep a population stable.
Just to break even.
Exactly. And South Korea is down to something like 0.7.
That is approaching science fiction territory.
Yeah.
And the source material points out this isn't random, right? It's actually a sign of societal success.
Yes.
You've got women getting educated, entering the workforce, having control over contraception. It seems like the wealthier a society gets, the fewer kids they have.
Precisely. It's what geographers call the demographic transition model. When you hit stage 4 or stage 5 of that model, which is where the US, Europe, and East Asia currently sit, you have low birth rates and low death rates.
Okay.
But because the death rate is low, that massive bulge of older people stays around, and there's no new base of young people underneath to support them.
So that traditional pyramid shape becomes a kite, gets completely top-heavy.
And kites are very hard to keep in the air.
Which brings us to the economic nightmare that keeps central bankers up at night, the dependency ratio. Yes. This was the concept I really wanted to dig into today because, look, it sounds like boring econ speak.
It does.
But it's actually the engine of this whole crisis.
Yeah.
It's basically a ratio comparing the non-working population to the working age population.
That's the textbook definition, yes.
So you've got the workers' people, roughly 15 to 64, who are generating GDP, paying income tax, doing the heavy lifting.
Right.
And then you have the dependents, which are the kids under 15 and the retirees over 64.
Right.
And in an aging society, that ratio shoots up.
Yeah.
Meaning fewer workers are carrying economic load for more dependents.
Exactly. In the mid-20th century, that ratio was beautiful from an economic standpoint. You had a massive base of workers supporting a relatively tiny tip of retirees.
The baby boom era.
Right. But now, as the boomers retire and the birth rate crashes, the ratio is getting crushed. We are moving from a world where you might have had 10 workers supporting one retiree to a world where you have maybe 2 workers supporting one retiree.
2 to 1. Just think about the tax implications of that for a second. If you're one of those 2 workers, your tax burden has to be astronomical to support that one person's pension and health care.
Or the benefits have to be cut. There is no magic third option here. And it's not just about taxes either. It's about severe labor shortages.
I'm already seeing this.
We are. Who drives the trucks? Who stocks the shelves? Who nurses the elderly? If you don't have new bodies entering the workforce, overall productivity stalls. An economy needs labor to grow. If your labor force shrinks, your economy shrinks.
Which leads us directly to the pension crisis. The notes mentioned the founding of Social Security in the U.S. back in 1935.
Yeah, this is a crucial piece of historical context.
Because I think people forget that when FDR signed that into law, The average life expectancy was what, like 60?
Barely over 60, yes.
Yeah.
The system was designed as a safety net for the very few who lived past working age. It was never engineered to support a massive population where living to 85 or 90 is normal.
Wow.
It's just a math problem. Social Security is a pay-as-you-go system.
Even though I think a lot of people still believe there's a lockbox in Washington with their name on it, like a personal savings account.
Which is a total myth. Today's workers pay for today's retirees. So back in 1950, you had roughly 16 workers paying for every one beneficiary.
16 to 1.
It was easy. Today, it's approaching 3 to 1. By the 2030s, it'll be closer to 2 to 1. The math simply collapses.
Yeah.
You cannot fund a 30-year retirement for a massive population on the backs of a shrinking workforce without something breaking.
And that something breaking is usually the national budget. But it's not just pensions that are draining resources. It's the physical body itself. The healthcare costs, specifically highlighted in the research, are terrifying.
It's the most expensive part of the equation by far. An 85-year-old consumes exponentially more healthcare resources than a 45-year-old.
Right.
You're looking at chronic disease management, multiple surgeries, long-term care facilities. As a nation ages, the percentage of GDP that gets devoured by healthcare creates a gravitational pull on the whole economy. It just sucks money away from everything else.
So education, infrastructure, R&D, it all gets crowded out because we have to pay for geriatric care.
And this happens because of who holds the political power.
Boom. There it is, the political pivot.
Yeah.
This was the part of the deep dive that made me realize this isn't just an abstract math problem. It's a real-time power struggle. We talk about the youth vote all the time in the media, but the gray vote is the real heavyweight champion.
It's about sheer numbers and consistency. Older people turn out to vote at much higher rates than young people. Politicians are rational survivalists. If they know the 65-plus demographic decides the election, they're going to prioritize policies that satisfy that demographic.
Right, which means prioritizing healthcare spending and preserving Social Security at all costs.
Exactly. Protecting those programs is the third rail of politics. Touch it and your career dies. But the sources point out this creates a really interesting policy dynamic.
How so?
Well, the older generation is often more fiscally conservative when it comes to things like inflation.
Because they live on fixed incomes.
Exactly. They don't want their savings devalued. So they often vote against tax increases.
But wait, they also require massive government spending on their care.
Right.
So you have this tension where a powerful voting bloc wants expensive services preserved, but they resist the tax hikes needed to pay for them. Or they vote against spending that benefits the young, like school bonds.
And that budget battle strains national resources heavily. We're seeing this play out in Europe and the US right now. It has the potential to create a lot of intergenerational friction.
You see it in the cultural zeitgeist. That whole "okay boomer" meme from a few years ago wasn't just a joke. It was an expression of economic frustration from a younger demographic, feeling like the ladder has been pulled up.
The sources are careful to remain objective about this, but they do highlight that shifting national budgets primarily toward elderly care fundamentally changes how a government serves its citizens.
Okay, let's move from the ballot box to the living room, because this transforms families just as much as governments. The shift away from multi-generational households.
This is where the demographic shift gets very personal. Historically, we had a multi-generational model, the Walton family style, where grandparents, parents, and kids were all under one roof, or at least on the same farm.
Right.
But we've shifted to the nuclear family model. So now you have parents living into their 90s, but they aren't living with their kids.
In the traditional model, they'd be in the spare bedroom.
Yeah.
Now they're in an assisted living facility that costs $5,000 or $6,000 a month. Or they're aging alone in a suburban house they can't physically maintain.
And without that multi-generational safety net, the reliance on formal care facilities skyrockets, which creates immense financial and emotional stress for the adult children.
The sandwich generation.
Yes. They're sandwiched between paying for their own kids and managing their parents' elder care. The research calls it the care burden.
And it becomes a second full-time job for millions of people.
Usually women, it's worth noting.
Right, which pulls them out of the workforce, further hurting that dependency ratio we just talked about. It's a vicious cycle.
It really is.
But I want to make sure we aren't just broadcasting doom and gloom here, because the source material did highlight a silver lining to all this.
It did. We shouldn't ignore the social benefit of healthy older populations. When older people are healthy and active, they often provide a massive unpaid service to the economy.
Childcare.
Exactly. If grandparents are able to watch the grandchildren, it allows the working age parents to participate fully in the labor force.
So it's a huge subsidy to the economy.
It is. The complication, of course, is that this only works while the older generation remains physically healthy. Once they require care themselves, the flow of resources reverses.
Okay. So we've diagnosed the issue. We've got an aging population, a shrinking workforce, a squeezed dependency ratio, and changing family structures.
Right.
The sources point to countries like Japan, Germany, and Italy as the poster children for this trend. Nations with extremely low fertility and high life expectancy. So how are they fixing it?
Governments are exploring a few main mitigation strategies, and none of them are easy. Let's start with the one that economists usually point to first: promoting immigration.
Bringing in working-age people from other countries to patch the holes in the labor force.
Yes. On a spreadsheet, immigration is the perfect fix. If you have a shortage of young workers, you welcome them from abroad. It improves the dependency ratio instantly.
Because you get a tax-paying worker without the state having had to pay for their childhood education and healthcare.
Exactly. Germany has used this strategy quite a bit to stabilize its workforce.
But we also see how politically explosive that is right now.
Right. The sources note that while immigration solves the economic math problem, it can introduce complex social and political dynamics that governments then have to navigate.
Okay, so if importing workers is politically fraught, what about just making more workers domestically? Pro-natalist policies.
Government incentives to encourage people to have more babies, trying to get back to that 2.1 replacement level.
Subsidized romance.
Essentially, yes. Governments are trying everything. Tax breaks, baby bonuses, subsidized daycare. Some countries have offered massive financial incentives for having 3 or more kids.
But the data in the sources shows it's largely ineffective, right? Why doesn't free money work?
Because the true cost of having a child in a modern high-income economy is much more than just diapers and food. It's the opportunity cost.
No.
For women especially, taking time out of a modern career path for multiple children creates a significant penalty in lifetime earnings. A one-time government bonus doesn't offset that. Plus, there is a fundamental cultural shift in Stage 5 countries. Increased access to education and employment has shifted life goals. People simply value different things now.
So you can't bribe people into changing their fundamental life trajectory.
Exactly. Which leaves us with a third major strategy: raising the retirement age.
Keeping people in the workforce longer.
Ooh.
Which makes logical sense,
Yeah.
but is incredibly unpopular.
It is deeply unpopular. But mathematically, it directly attacks the dependency ratio. It keeps people in the working column and delays their entry into the dependent column.
But it feels like a broken promise to the workers. You spend your whole life paying into a system expecting to rest at 65, and then the government moves the goalpost to 68 or 70.
It does feel that way. But the sources suggest that adjusting the retirement age is one of the most direct levers a government can pull to keep the system solvent.
You also mentioned workforce participation as another angle, finding ways to engage more of the existing population.
Right. Whether that's creating more flexible work arrangements to keep older adults engaged part-time or investing in automation to cover the labor gaps. But the core strategies remain immigration, birth rate incentives, and working longer.
So to recap where we are living much longer, we are having way fewer kids, it's making the dependency ratio skyrocket. And that mathematical reality is reshaping our economies, how we vote, and how our families actually live day to day.
That's the silver tsunami in a nutshell.
It's a lot to process. But as we wrap up, I know you wanted to leave us with a final thought, something that builds on that idea of raising the retirement age.
Yes. I think it's worth considering what this means for the arc of a human life. We treat aging as just a decline. But if the solution to the dependency ratio is that we simply have to work longer because we live longer, does the concept of retirement as we know it eventually become obsolete?
Oh, that's interesting.
Right. The current model is very linear. You get educated, you work for 40 years, and then you have a hard stop and retire for 5 or 10 years.
But if you're routinely living to 95 or 100.
Exactly. A 40-year career followed by a 30-year retirement doesn't make sense mathematically or psychologically. So maybe we are moving toward a multi-stage life.
Where it's less linear.
Yes. Education, work, a sabbatical, re-education for a new field, work again, part-time mentorship. Maybe that hard stop of retirement disappears entirely and leisure gets integrated throughout a much longer, more varied life path.
So the silver tsunami doesn't just break the old system. It forces us to completely redesign what a life looks like in a Stage 5 society.
I think so. It's a massive challenge, but also an incredible opportunity to rethink the structure of our lives. I'd encourage everyone listening to think about what their own multi-stage life might actually look like.
That is a fascinating thought to end on. It gives you a lot to mull over. Thank you for walking us through this deep dive.
My pleasure.
And thank you for listening. We will catch you on the next deep dive.